Okay, welcome back to Business Owners Speak. Today, I'm thrilled to have with us James Farese with ReachLink. James, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Happy that you decided to join us today, and anxious to learn more about you and your journey as a business owner. So, if you could, start out just telling us a little bit about you and the business.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm excited to share and thanks for having me. My name is James Farese. I'm the founder of a company called ReachLink. ReachLink is an online mental health therapy platform. We connect licensed providers, mental health providers, with people looking for assistance with things like anxiety, depression, stress, workplace issues, relationships. We built a platform that connects those cohorts of people together. Our platform is very provider centric, so we focus a lot on um, tools for the provider to make to streamline the biz ops side of therapy. So we want the therapist to focus on giving therapy, not things like billing insurance companies and credentialing with insurance companies, contracting with them, customer service with the members, that sort of thing. And so if you think about the model, it's very similar to like Uber, right? But for therapists. So the therapist signs in, does the session, signs out. We handle everything else from A to Z for the provider and also for the member. We started in 2019 originally as an aftercare solution for people discharging from substance use treatment centers. I used to work in that industry and started basically a year before COVID happened. Had been live for about 6 months. COVID happens, sticks around a lot longer than we all thought it would, and just kind of right place with we had a number of providers already um, online, and so people started reaching out for more than just addiction aftercare issues, more general mental health, and so we expanded the scope from just addiction aftercare to more general mental health, which is what we primarily do today. Fast forward to today, we have about 200 providers on the platform. We're in a number of states nationally. We're in network nationally with all the major payers, so Cigna, Aetna, United Healthcare, a number of regional plans as well, and we're growing quickly. We've grown over 10% a month for the last 6 months, and it's been really kind of a rocket ship ride. We've built everything kind of in-house from our billing team to our software development, everything we kind of do in-house, and providers seem to like it, members seem to like it. We have really good internal numbers in terms of retention and NPS scores and that sort of thing. And so really just blessed to be an opportunity to be able to help people. Mental health seems to be a hot topic in America and continues to be. And so we're going to do what we can to mitigate that.
Wow. Great synopsis and super interesting because as I do this, everybody has a COVID story, right? And most are bad. But every once in a while, I talk to a business that just kind of hit it at the right time, and it is what it is, and that's super interesting that that kind of worked out. So I'm curious, what were you doing before this business?
So I was in an adjacent industry. So I was a partner in a substance use treatment center group, and that's kind of how that was the catalyst really for coming up with the idea for ReachLink. In that industry, at least in South Florida, a lot of treatment hotbeds are southern states, Texas, Florida, Arizona, California. And in our case, a lot of clients would come down from the Midwest or Northeast, come down for 30, 60, 90-day episodes of care, go back home, would often do really well while they were in treatment and then have issues once they got back home. And so my original idea, which I came up with in 2018, was just to extend the continuum of care, stabilize the transition process from facility-based care back to whether it was, a halfway house or some other step down or even back home. And the thesis was try to keep the client engaged with the provider that they just spent, 30, 60, 90 days building rapport with. Oftentimes when you're turning your life around in that situation, everything changes in your life, the people, the places, the things. And so you don't really have anything that's familiar except, the relationships that you started to rebuild or build while you were in treatment. And so that was really the idea. And it came from my work in the substance use treatment center space. and COVID really, like I said, kind of forced us to expand the scope beyond that. Just not that we chose that, we just got inundated with requests for additional mental health issues, and we still do some like substance use aftercare, but the majority is more general mental health today.
I'm curious, given that your thesis, which makes a ton of sense, were you able to deploy that for a while? Did you see some benefits and see some results from that?
We did. The early days we weren't doing nearly the numbers that we were today, and dealing with people that are suffering from, depending on the stage in the recovery that they're at, there's a lot of challenges sometimes, access to transportation, access to even internet, having a
Yeah.
device that can connect to the internet, right? So the demand was there in terms of people needing the service. We were running into more logistical issues with that. I think it's interesting because we were kind of early post COVID. If you have a PM or EMR software for your healthcare business, almost all of them have a telehealth component today. If the doctor, says Fridays are going to be my telehealth day, I'll be in practice from Monday to Thursday. That didn't exist pre-COVID. You had companies like BetterHelp or Talkspace, but for the most part, even Zoom, wasn't nearly as popular
Right.
pre-COVID as it is, today. And so, had we started with that thesis post-COVID, I think the adoption would have been a little bit faster. But COVID really accelerated the adoption of that, not just for our industry, our vertical, but every healthcare vertical really just kind of forced adoption, um, which I don't think, looking back, we kind of duct taped a bunch of software solutions together to make it work. Where, if I say, telehealth today, anyone knows what that means. But if you say that, in 2018 or 2019, it's, well, what is that like? You call your doctor on the phone, like what is that, right? And so, it's very ubiquitous now. It wasn't at the time. And so I think there were, timing, I think in business is everything. And sometimes you mean to time things, sometimes it just happens. In our case, it just happened. Um, had we been any earlier, who knows, right? Had we been later, right, it might have been even more competitive, right? So we're happy with what happened, but it's an interesting looking back. It's really interesting kind of how it unfolded.
Yeah. So the product itself, do you have a software background like somewhere, or is that just part of your team? Did your team build the software themselves? Like, how did that all come about?
Yeah, so we started on licensed, off the shelf software. Like I said, we jerry-rigged, duct taped a bunch of stuff together through APIs at the beginning. I did that mostly myself. There's off the shelf tools that you can use to kind of connect APIs. I'm not a developer. I'm somewhat technical. I have some experience in projects like that. And so we cycled through probably two or three different off the shelf pieces of software, for different reasons to accommodate growth, pricing, feature sets, etc. And we found that we were building, excuse me, we found that we were building the workflows around the software instead of the software around the workflows. And it got to a point where we couldn't customize the software enough to our workflows and what we were doing. And the only way that I saw us to be able to continue to scale without constantly adding headcount, was to build our own custom solution. And so we hired an agency, ended up bringing the project ultimately in-house. So today we have an in-house software team that continues to maintain the current build while also adding new features. We're a web app today. We have a like a native iOS, Android mobile app launching later this year, and we've done all of that in-house to date.
Wow, that's great. So what is the makeup of your team right now?
Um, so the main kind of core departments are, we have a care coordination department. That team is really the first point of contact when a member is calling in to look for services. They'll walk you through your insurance benefits. They'll match you to the appropriate therapist. They'll answer any other kind of general questions that you have about how therapy works, what's the process like, or what to expect. They're kind of like your Sherpa on your therapy journey, your non-clinical Sherpa. And then we have a billing department, which handles all of our insurance claims. Our business now is about 90% payer supported. At the beginning of the business, it was about 90% cash pay. And so that's kind of flip-flopped over the last 5 years. And so we have a team that kind of handles that. We also have a credentialing department. So even if you're contracted with a payer, you still have to associate that provider that you hire with your contract with the commercial payer. And so there's a team that kind of handles the payer onboarding of our providers. We have a provider recruiting department, so they hire 20 to 25 providers a month at this point. And then we have software development team that handles uh, the tech side of things. So those are really the core kind of units in the business. And then we're in an interesting stage in the business. We're out of the startup stage and we're in a very high growth period of the business. But we're probably a year away from being a private equity target, like a real private equity target. And so we're very lean in terms of how we build. Um, and we're looking to our philosophy has been anytime that we have to hire headcount for some new task, we go and automate it. We're heavily reliant on AI, both in our software and in um, our our homegrown software, as well as the tools that we use for day-to-day work. And we've been able to keep the team at about 10 to 15 people over the last 5 years, even delivering tens of thousands of sessions a year because we're so reliant on mitigating manual labor through automation. And we'll continue to do that for as long as we can.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And so, with the emphasis on mental health these days, and every podcast I listen to is I hear a lot of better help, yeah, that you can do. So, although
Yeah.
you're somewhat provider focused, can you tell us a little bit about how it helps the individual utilizing your system and kind of what are some of the benefits that people find from that?
Yeah, it really depends on the case type. We're very evidence-based in the sense that we track a lot of the outcomes when it comes to sessions. So, for example, after each session, we will survey the member with a clinical survey. There's open source screening tool or assessment tools like a GAD-7 or PHQ-9, which will GAD-7 is a generalized anxiety 7-question survey. PH9 is a 9-question depression survey. So we'll administer these assessments to members after each session so that we can track kind of on a linear basis over time improvement or lack of improvement in terms of symptomality. And so we track that in a very concrete way and deliver that back to the provider so they can look at that in kind of a visualized way. Um, I think in terms, of, how we help the member, right? I think today, in society, people are looking for kind of a trusted third party, as unbiased as that, third party can be, right? Where they can come to that person, ask advice, talk about things that are going on in their lives. I think, you know, with COVID and even in a post-COVID world, so much of our connection is now virtual. And, as efficient as that is, I think it also can lead to a lot of loneliness and depression. And I think there's a lot of people that are not making connections that they would have been making 10 or 20 years ago in person. And so there's really this need for, I think, someone that can help walk you through issues, right? Because a lot of the population that we deal with, we don't do any SMI, severe mental illness. We're dealing more with anxiety and depression
Yeah.
that everyone deals with at some point in their life, right? And I think people want help navigating these situations in a way with someone that, you know, you might have had that conversation with your neighbor or a parent or a cousin or some other person 20 years ago. And I don't think we have the same social connections that we did.
Yeah.
And I think that leads to people looking for someone that's qualified to help walk them through difficult times in their lives. And so I think, you know, on its face, it's the anxiety, the loneliness, the depression that we can help alleviate. But then over time, you know, what our providers do is they're really trained to identify, you know, who you as a person or what you as a person will most benefit from. Are you someone that, you know, needs to process information? Do you need someone to ask you certain questions? You just need someone that you can unload on? Are there actual techniques that the provider needs to teach you and how to deal with these situations, right? To try to change the way that you think about um, certain situations. And so we try to approach it with a very kind of clinical, you know, we try to approach these situations with a lens for the clinical piece of it in terms of the assessments, but without dehumanizing it as much as possible, right? You know, a lot of platforms will give you kind of like um, a predetermined curriculum, if you will, in terms of like this is what session one looks like, this is what session six looks like. Our providers have autonomy to identify the right modalities for the member, and I think our members really appreciate that, and it adds a level of humanness and connection to the session that I'm not saying no other platform provides that, but I think people value that we provide that, and it shows in our NPS scores and other uh, pieces of feedback that we get from the member.
Sure. So, James, in closing, can you tell us, or at least provide some of the other business owners that are in our community, some words of wisdom from someone that has kind of been through it and in the thick of it, to other business owners on how to keep things moving?
I can try. You know, I haven't sold my business yet, so I don't know if I'm qualified to say that. You know, the big thing for I could, you know, looking back, I can count probably there's probably more times than I can count where had something not happened in that period of time, the business wouldn't have worked out, right? Whether it was a personnel need that we couldn't hire for or a capital need. And I think, you know, I think in business, right, especially when you're building and you're in the first couple years in that startup scale up mode, there's going to be a lot. It's really hard, right? I think it's harder than most people go into it. And, you know, at least all the entrepreneurs that I talk to, when, you know, you ask them, had you know, if you knew today how difficult it would have been, would you have done it? And a lot of times people say, I don't know if I would. They don't know the answer to the question. And I think that's true. And I think you know, it might be cliche or simple, but I think, you know, if you really believe in what you're doing and you're getting traction and there's and you can see the growth happening, even if it's not happening in concrete terms like revenue or whatever, but you see the traction happening. I think it's just keep going, right? So many people don't, in my opinion, don't achieve their goal or whatever they set out to do just because they stop going. And in business, you know, the only really way that it doesn't work out is if you stop, right? Now, you might have to lay off your whole team, you might have to downgrade your lifestyle, you might, but really the only way that it won't work out is if you stop, right? You know, and that can look differently in different situations, but I think a lot of people give up prematurely, not knowing how close they are. And looking back, I can 10, 15 inflection points where like if XYZ didn't happen, I would have been out of business. And you know, when I look back, it was just that I kept going. So I think I would say if you're on the entrepreneurial path and you like what you're doing and you have traction and you're doing everything right, I would say just keep going because you don't know what that next week, that next day, that next
Right.
month brings. And oftentimes that next week, day, month is the difference between you folding up or being able to keep going for another 6 months until that next inflection point. And I think it's just keep going, right? If you're in that early stage, just keep going.
Yeah. So very true. Simple, but very true. Keep going. All right, James Farese, thank you so much for your time today. The business is ReachLink, doing great things, helping a lot of people. So we really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
You bet.